recorded for people that are not able to attend. And then also feel free to grab your favorite beverage. It can be wine, tea, coffee, whatever. We want it to be like a virtual happy hour as well. So basically, we're going to start off walking through first and stepping into the mind of the shopper, and then thinking about what are some of the key trends we're seeing with regards to us as consumers. And then I'm going to hand off to Christina, who's going to have and lead a panel on retailer responses to some of these trends. And then we're going to close with Laura Winch from Validify, who will have a discussion around the role of tech in enabling some of these new services for retailers. So I am going to, hold on, if I can get the Zoom again to work correctly. So as in all things retail, I like to start with the customer first. So I think it's important for retailers to step back and consider the emotional journey we've been on as human beings and what state and mindset we'll be in as we return to stores. So I've done quite a bit of research during the pandemic, and however, in these 10 minutes, I can't cover all of these consumer trends. So what I've done is select 3 trends that I think will be important to consider as we reopen the doors in the coming weeks. So the first trend is what I call the rebirth of me, like our self 2.0. So ultimately, hopefully, we're going to come out of this a better version of ourselves. So hence this 2.0. So what does this mean? So during lockdown, we definitely fed our souls. As we kicked off the quarantine, we started off addressing our need for comfort, for security, and for self-care to soothe our soul. So we turned to food that nurtured us in times of stress or in childhood. We stocked up on disaster survival kits to feel more in control. We escaped by binging on our favorite music, TV shows, and movies from pivotal moments in our life that have gotten us through tough times before. We reconnected with family and friends near and far from all parts of life that shaped who we are. We brought out old games like Monopoly and Cluedo, or ordered them from Amazon to connect as a family. We gave ourselves permission to indulge in a well-deserved treat. So whether it was that extra beer or that glass of wine that turned into an entire bottle, or indulging in pizza, we definitely needed some kind of way to treat ourselves. Or maybe we even adopted a pet that we always wanted to have to help us feel not so lonely, especially as we're isolated from each other. And as the lockdown eases and we see a light at the end of the tunnel, we are now moving from like comfort food to a redefinition of health. So all of that comfort from that extra sugar, carbs, and alcohol, coupled with being less active indoors with the gyms closed, and all of the pandemic stress is actually quite a recipe for weight gain. So it's actually last month, more than 500,000 people on Facebook were talking about quarantine weight gain. And so now that we re-emerge from our cocoon, many of us will be looking for ways to lose that lockdown weight. And another thing we're seeing around this new definition of health is that while with catching and spreading the virus being a leading fear for many people, we're also becoming extremely vigilant on germs and reducing germs. So we're constantly disinfecting anything and everything that has the potential to be exposed. We're seeing more and more people have all of these like sanitation rituals around disinfecting groceries and packages, washing their hands more often, and using like new types of cleaning products, and experimenting with that on top of what they previously have used. And as we're now thinking about this next phase of re-engaging in society, and especially since there won't be any vaccine or treatment as of yet, our focus is really shifting to be more long-term and proactively taking a role in our health and making us as healthy as possible to be able to withstand something like a pandemic-like virus. So I guess doing some research and things around the vitamin D, supporting our immune system, and looking at new diets and protein sources, and thinking about what services might help us on our immunity boosting journey. That's going to definitely be in high demand in the coming months for those people with that mindset. And we're also still not clear on what the long-term psychological effects will be on us as individuals and as a society. So what I am optimistic about is that mental health is continuing to be acknowledged as something we shouldn't neglect. So this is definitely an area of opportunity for companies to offer ways to help their customers and employees heal. So with this extra time, as if we weren't busy enough before the pandemic, we have taken on new roles, become essentially a superhero at home. We've used the time to improve ourselves through new skills and talents, like taking courses to change our career. More and more people have found new hobbies and interests that brands can use to engage in a more meaningful way at home. So whether that's a look good tutorial being run by Space NK, figuring out how you can plant your own garden to grow your own vegetables, cooking with top chefs to create restaurant quality meals, all of these new and interesting ways to make us more self-sufficient and rely on our own skills. So others have had to take on new roles out of necessity, like learning how to touch up their own hair roots, cutting their family's hair, becoming a teacher for their instant homeschooling, and thinking of creative ways to keep the family entertained and celebrate milestones that may have happened during the lockdown. So after going through this, people are just becoming more self-sufficient and will look for ways to ensure their lives are better, future-proof, especially if there's a second wave. And now that we've had time to collect or reflect on our collective pause, people are now reevaluating the priorities and what's really important in life. So they're seriously thinking about their, I guess, what I call post-COVID resolutions. So whether that's thinking about how you can be kinder to yourself, kinder to others, staying connected with family, and looking at your bucket list and trying to check things off, being less wasteful, things around sustainability, buying less stuff, investing in things that are made to last, and really knowing like where things are made and sourced and who made, and I guess what I buy. So now that we are, I guess, thinking about actually stepping out of our home and our safe cocoon, we started by, and what I call reemerge from my bubble. We started by first stepping outside and looking in our yards, or those lucky enough to have outdoor space, to invest in making that a better place to be, whether that's a new grill, new furniture, new outdoor games. Sales for that have soared since the weather has improved. And they're now also thinking about venturing out further from your bubble to, I guess, get access to these physical and mental health benefits of just being in nature and in green spaces. So we're going to see more and more going to the parks. So, I mean, we've already seen that, but it's only going to continue. And even in Iceland, they're giving these tree hugging lessons to hug trees and not people, to just get the benefits to your mind from doing something like that. We're also going to see, especially as the transport is not going to be as accessible or safe, we may be scared still to take public transportation. So we're going to see more and more walking and cycling. And as we've seen announced that more of the streets in London are going to be car free. So this will only help it, biking and cycling to be a more sustainable form of transportation. And one of the other things around, as we come out of this bubble, it's going to be around this local love. I mean, we've already seen that emerge, but really, really supporting local brands in our high street and what we want it to look like, and continuing to support them during the pandemic, to make sure that they actually last when they reemerge. So especially with some of the travel restrictions that are going to continue across different countries, and the inconvenience and safety of getting on an airplane, local staycations to rediscover the beauty of the UK or have an experience off the beaten path with less crowds will be viable holiday options, I think, for the summer months. So lastly, I do want to talk about something that's quite important, is trust. So this last trend is around rebuilding trust. It's such a critical building block in moving forward, not just for retail, but also in our broader society in getting through this together. So in times of uncertainty and stress and where we feel unsafe to be here, we do seek out people and institutions that bring us reassurance and answers, clarity, and guidance. And while there are many stories of acts of kindness and leadership, there are also many who are left not knowing who to trust. So I think a lot of us are asking that question. So whether it's from government, businesses, or the medical community, that they've given us pause in their response to this crisis and planted seeds of doubt. So I think it's going to be important that that's going to be in our heads as shoppers when we return to the stores. So taking into account that we're going to need that extra level of information and care to make us feel safe again when we go back to the stores. So we're already seeing this trust but verify mindset in what tools have been developed. So Beta launched a tool called Shop Safely, where it's ranking all of these retailers against 14 different criteria, and you can look up one of them to see how they scored on a report card. We've also seen tools to look at what people did to help during the pandemic, whether it was a company or a celebrity. So in this case, I did a quick scan of Tesco, and they came out ahead with a positive score of +8 on that tool. So you can take a look if you want to look up your company later. So lastly, I think just on a closing thought around this is that retailers are going to have to redefine this trust relationship with their customers. And what does that mean? What is Trust 2.0 is thinking about, are you demonstrating competence? Are you showing customers that you actually know what you're doing? Are you visibly showing that? And then secondly, I guess around care, are you showing that you actually have my well-being and best interests at heart? Do you genuinely show me that you care about me as a customer? What about your employees? Do they have the right PPE? Are they provided training on how to de-escalate situations and handle customers who are scared or frustrated or occasionally hostile? And are you consistent? Is this consistently applied across all of your stores? Am I seeing the same guidelines applied across the entire estate? And lastly, are you telling me the truth? Are you keeping your promises? And are you showing integrity as a retailer and business? So I think this overall, it's a really salient period of time where people are going to remember who they turn to and who helped them get through this. And I think retailers can play a vital role in that. So I've kind of walked through quite quickly, right, 3 different trends and what we're going to be going into stores with in terms of our mindsets. And now I want to, I guess, turn the page or pass it to Christina to lead a panel discussion around retailers' responses and how are they responding to some of these trends, and what will retail look like in the next few weeks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandy. My name is Christina Herbach, and I am a Kellogg alum from 2016. So hi to all of the Kellogg folks out there, also the Wharton folks, and lots of other schools represented as well, and businesses. I am a senior retail strategist at Kurt Solomon, which is a boutique firm within the Accenture strategy family. And we're going to be having a really exciting panel with 2 really awesome gentlemen. So the first is Gaston Torn, who is joining us as the CMO of A Peer Here. And we also have Jace Tyrell joining us as the CEO of the New West End Company. And Sandy, I think that you will have to work on your end just if we can make Jace one of our co-hosts. And then we can go ahead and kick off.
Yeah, he's a co-host.
Excellent. Great. So welcome both, and welcome to everyone on the line. I want to make this discussion really fun, and so we're going to not take it too stilted. We're going to make it a bit interactive. As Sandy said in the beginning, if you've got questions, please drop those in the comment section. We're going to have some Q&A at the end, and then we'll kick off without further ado. So when I first started thinking about this panel and this question, and even just thinking about where we're at now today, a quote came back to me that a mentor told me very early on in my career, that retail was nothing more and nothing less than buying something you need from someone you trust. And there's something really appealing, I think, about going back to that definition right now, getting back to basics and the essentials. We talk a lot about the essential work. So I'm really curious, Gaston, Jace, what you would say is the most essential things that retailers need to be focusing on right now when they reopen stores? And how do they build back that trust that's really essential and at the center of that interaction?
Great, maybe let's start. Great, well, welcome everyone. Christina already introduced me. I'm Gaston Tourne. I'm CMO at Appear here. We are the world's leading marketplace for retail. So some describe us as the Airbnb of retail, and effectively what we try to do is to make booking a retail space as easy as booking a hotel room. So going back to your question, I think there is something for retailers to think after this pandemic that goes beyond the transaction, that goes beyond selling. And I think there is an element there that is more related to human connection. And that's something that we see a lot nowadays, particularly people going back to the streets and going back to the cities. They're not just looking to buy stuff, they're looking to connect to spaces. And I think especially for retailers, this is a very good opportunity to explore that. For the last 3 months, we only bought things online, or like 2 months. Like I think like all of us, we even lost sense of time, right? But most online experiences feel sterile. I feel like nobody can really remember like a purchase that they made on Amazon or like on any other website, and they really think of it with like fond memories. And I feel there is something completely different that can be achieved in an offline space, and particularly in stores, that has to do more with that human connection. I love one of our customers. She's called Gloria Noto, and she has a beauty shop in LA. She had to close it only 2 months after she opened it. And now she's thinking of reopening it on June 1st. When I asked her, like, what are you most excited about? She said, I am excited that I might be the only person that is going to chat with that customer probably for a week, because a lot of them are self-isolating and they are quite, in that isolated world. So I think like that's something that we need to think beyond the transaction. What's that human connection that only offline retail can provide?
Yeah, I love that.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As introduced by Sandy and Christina, I'm James Tyrrell. I have the great privilege to represent the golden triangle of retail, I think, in London and probably the world, which is Bond Street, Oxford Street and Regent Street, literally a Prada to Primark and everything in between that in the world of retail, with hotels and restaurants as well. And it's great to come on here and join this discussion today, because we've had quite a few discussions recently on how we reopen the West End and lots of operational matters. But it's good to get a bit deeper and think about the customer, which is obviously at the heart of retail as well, and what they're going to be like as we come out of this, and also how things are structurally shifted. I mean, what's very clear to everybody in the industry and globally is there has been a pronounced shift to online, which obviously is already a shift that we were seeing, and a desire by customers to really shop in a sustainable way. And I'm sure we'll come on to this in a bit more detail as we get into the panel. But to echo Gaston, I think, the heart of retail is this experience, which is very personal. And whether you're buying, something from Tiffany, or you're going to Primark to buy something for the beach or whatever, there is still a personal interaction. At the end of the day, humans need to wear things. We need products, whether they're high fashion or high street. But I think what this pandemic has done is just fast-tracked something so structural that was changing anyway. And it's very clear, even sort of the narrative and the public discourse over the past couple of months, is that companies that have purpose-driven approach to their product, to their services, to their people, are really going to survive in the new world of retail and what's coming down our way. So I think it's quite exciting, actually, some of these massive changes we're going to see in probably months that would normally take years happen before our very eyes in 2020. I should say I'm also alumni of London Business Schools. Anyone from LBS on here that I shared with you as well? I was there last year. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so I mean, I think that you're both right. I think there's also, it's always challenging to predict the future. I heard someone say the other day that it's hard to know what the high street will look like in 10 years, but the people walking down it will probably be wearing clothes. So whether you're going to the beach or you're going to Prada, I think there'll definitely be a market for it. The flip side of that question, and I'd love to hear, maybe flip it as well, Jace, you first, and then Gaston. Do you think that there's anything kind of inessential that we're seeing stripped away by this moment, like things that we might leave behind now that we've had this kind of great pause when we reopen?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've had a whole bunch of calls today and earlier in the week with every type of retailer you can imagine, and the conversation with Hernandez is very different, literally, to a department store and River Island, for example. And actually, how do you do retail in a socially distant environment? How do you have that interaction? How do you customers want to experience, touch the product? And interesting, we got onto actually Christmas today, which obviously is a peak period for retail. And a lot of what retailers do best is that experience. So think about Hamleys at Christmas. It's very interactive, it's very people-based, it's demonstrating product before customers buy. So what's going to be stripped away is obviously that interaction, very personal. It's going to become more mechanical, isn't it, for the next period ahead? You're going to come in and transact. I think what we've heard a lot from our businesses is the conversion rates are very high. So coming out of lockdown, those customers coming into stores are purchasing, 90% conversion. So they're coming with a purpose in mind to purchase. But I think what we might lose, though, is some of that intimacy. And I hope as we get beyond lockdown and get beyond social distancing and get into next year, that we get back to some of that, because otherwise retail will feel very different, won't it? If there's no change rooms and no touching the products before we buy them.
Mm.
Yeah,
I imagine, obviously.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think probably what we're going to miss in the next few months is the intimacy aspect. I think probably most of you already studied like the formula of trust, right? And they say trust is composed by being reliable, like being credible, and also intimacy is a key factor. So I think probably what I would do as a retailer is, knowing that intimacy is going to be down for the next few months, is really focusing on being as reliable and credible as possible. And I think a lot of the credibility comes from having a purpose that goes beyond the product. I always think like, we don't buy products, we buy better versions of ourselves. And that needs to be embedded into the story of anything that you're selling. So I feel like, my recommendation would be like, knowing that human interaction is going to be for sure affected, make sure that you double down on being reliable, on making sure that anything that is shipped or anything that has to do with safety in the store is 100% accurate and communicated, but also make sure that you're credible as a brand, because people are going to be looking for that.
Yeah, kind of nailing the base of that triangle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, providing that credibility, providing that safety, providing that reassurance, and then working the way back up to that intimacy and that trust and that self-actualization at the top. Yeah, that's great. So the next question, I think Sandy really teed us up in an amazing way, thinking about where the consumer's mindset is at. We talked a little bit about where the retailer's mindset is at, but it would be a huge miss not to get both of your perspectives on the third party here, which of course is landlords. So retailers don't just interact with the customer that they're selling to, but the community around them and the real estate that they rent. And both of you have really unique perspectives, both from kind of small indie brands, direct to consumer brands, as well as, Jace, as you mentioned, some of these really, really mega big brands and very established retailers. So I'm curious, what do you see, if anything, changing between the retailer and the landlord relationship?
Should I start this time?
Sure.
Go, Gaston.
Cool. I feel like I don't see many changes. I think what I see is more an acceleration of a trend that was already in the market, which is, shifting to flexibility. I think brands have been requesting more flexibility for a long time. And I think a lot of landlords have already shifted to that model, but the ones who are still behind, like, it's a really good moment to, in a way, question those fundamentals, or question those beliefs, and make sure that you are ready for what's coming. So I think probably what we're going to see is really an acceleration of flexibility as a trend. What we see is like not just indies, but also big brands. And we work, with the likes of Apple, Amazon, Nike. All of them are thinking about the future in more flexible terms. So I think that's probably something that, it's not going to be just for this pandemic. I think moving forward, we're going to move to flexible retail as the main option to do offline.
Do you agree?
Ish, not fully actually. So I think there's a fourth dimension there is also the banks and the lenders, because you start with the financing. You have a landlord, you have a tenant, and you have a customer. And you work through that cycle. And I think what this pandemic has shown is it's a fragile balance, between all of that. So of course you have very big landlords, and I should point out, I think the landlords have been painted these evil corporate entities, but actually they build the buildings, they invest in their infrastructure, they fund schools, communities, hospitals. Obviously retail is part of what they have. So I think, we need to recognize they have a role to play in society and the built environment and the communities and towns and cities we create. But I think what it's shown is, I would agree with Gaston, is there was already a trend moving away from this historic approach in Britain of upward only rents, 25-year leases or 20-year leases or 10-year leases. But actually the sharing of risk and reward is hugely important. And actually you need flexibility for tenants to move in and out. You need to share the risk and obviously the upside and the downside of how that business is trading, and also work with them so you can really get underneath what their business strategy is as a retailer or a leisure brand or hospitality, and support them. I mean, I don't think any property owner doesn't want a tenant that isn't profitable and actually have a sustainable business that they can work off. I think the other bit is also that in the UK, retail is the most prescriptive use class in planning. Without going into a lecture on planning for a minute, but actually every local authority wants to protect retail in every frontage on every building. And actually, it was interesting, 2 years ago, Tesla wanted to open on Oxford Street and they couldn't. They opened, but they couldn't sell cars, which is ridiculous, because actually Tesla is an incredible brand that talks to consumers, that has a product, and we want cars that have electric, and actually are not polluting the streets of London. So I think what's really important is local authorities getting flexibility into the type of retailers that can use ground floors. We had another example where Ralph Lauren on Regent Street, a beautiful emporium, they opened a couple of years ago. They have a restaurant, if you've ever been there, during pre-lockdown. And actually they couldn't promote their restaurant, their bar. And actually we've got to get beyond that and actually allow users and consumers to have different experiences, whether it's Microsoft, Tesla, Ralph Lauren Cafe in these high streets and towns. Otherwise retail's got no future. So I think that's been interesting. But the landlord-tenant dynamic is going to get more stark in the next 6-12 months. There's going to be a lot of stress on balance sheets. We're probably going to lose about 25-30% of retail in this country in the next 12 months. So I think when we come out of the other side of this, that complete resetting of the relationship between landlord and tenant is going to be quite pronounced. And the long-term landlords will have a better future if they become more flexible and become more of a partner in that relationship, rather than just a binary collect the rent and be absent. And I think in the West End and Mayfair, to be fair, we've seen much more of that in the last few years pre-COVID, but it's only going to accelerate that trend, as Gaston was saying. And probably a lot more companies like Appear Here, although there are no others, of course, apart from Appear Here, that are offering that flexibility for brands to interact with consumers in towns and cities as well.
Yeah, I think you started out by disagreeing, but I do think there's a lot of, what I hear there is, if I think about, the species that survive are not necessarily the strongest or the most intelligent, but those that are most able to adapt. And I think we are in such a huge period of change that we've all had to adapt our lifestyles, the ways that we work, the way that we teach, the way we parent. Consumers are adapting, retailers are going to have to adapt, all the way up the food chain. The landlords are going to have to adapt and become more flexible as well. And I think there will be some retailers who may not make it through, but hopefully the ones that do are the ones that are most adaptive to change. Great, so I'm going to change tack a little bit and go to a question that we actually got from one of the attendees. And it was a question around sustainability. And sustainability has kind of been a super hot topic. It's been talked about on panels like these kind of incessantly over the last few years. And it's still, if not even more, hyper relevant now. But I think there's been some interesting tension around what I've seen coming out in the news. So on the one hand, for example, you've got Gucci talking about how they're officially not going to be keeping up with the fashion calendar anymore. And we see this movement, as Sandy said, towards buying local produce and supporting local. On the other hand, there's been reports of, you know, people being maybe less comfortable buying vintage or buying used products or using recyclable containers or reusable bags. So I'm just curious, from each of your opinions, maybe we start with you, Jace. Where do you think sustainability goes from here? Is what's going to stay the same, accelerate, change?
I mean, it's a massive issue. We look at it through a number of prisms. So we have, what are our retailers doing in this space in terms of ethical sourcing, supply chain, what customers demand? We look at it from the property owner's perspective, which is how are they going on their journey to be net carbon zero in the next 10, 20, 30 years for their buildings, for their energy use. We think about the customer and what they expect when they come to destinations like the West End, but also what they can do in terms of their own use of plastic, sustainable fashion from that side. And then you think of the big macro picture. We have the UN sustainability goals we're trying to meet. We have government regulation that's coming down. We actually did a session in January. We actually said, what would be the physical and business risk to the West End if, for example, we had 2% rise in temperature next year? And what would happen? What would happen to the West End? And actually all of it would be underwater, actually. So we wouldn't even have the shops and the great streets of the West End. And then we think also, wind back a bit from that, what are the regulatory risks to business, to raising capital and finance so you can actually have a business in retail? And then really, what customers expect now. You know, I read the figure the other day, 350,000 tons of retail fashion goes to land waste in the UK alone every year. I mean, that is shocking and unacceptable. And, you know, this pandemic is only going to heighten that requirement to move faster and quicker in this space. And at New West End Company, we think about sustainability and probably more an environmental place around air quality. I mean, we have some of the most polluted streets in Europe, in Oxford Street, Bond Street, and Regent Street. So we want to have every vehicle electric by 2025. We want to be the first truly zero emission transport zone in the UK by 2025. And that is a Herculean task to get every bit of business, local authority, transport authority coming together to do that. But we know if we don't achieve one aspect of environmental improvements, such as air quality, customers just won't come. They will not come to the West End, never mind what the stores are doing in their own supply chain and their own practices. So I think everyone recognizes that. I hope this pandemic will actually fast track some of these initiatives and strategies that we've been talking about in boardrooms for a number of years now. The other thing I was really struck by, I think you touched on it, I've got it here, was this, the rewiring fashion, which I think you might have seen by Business of Fashion, which is related to Gucci. And it was the big sort of, I guess, kickback from the industry saying, we're not going to do the runway shows. We're not going to do what we've been doing for 50 years in the retail fashion sector. And how can we repurpose and be more responsible as an industry? So I guess I've given you lots of answers there to sustainability because there's lots of strands to it. But I think for us as a business, what we're focused on is what we can do in the physical environment, what we can do with the buildings, the actual customers and the retailers doing better things in their own businesses, and then what we can do to the air quality and some of the environmental issues around that as well. Gaston, over to you.
Yeah, I'm thinking like sustainability will mean more than ever after this crisis, I think, going local. That's what we are seeing, both in terms of like, if you look at another industry, which is, you know, very close to retail, workspaces, people working local, like that has a massive positive effect in the environment because it's less unnecessary pollution for the cities we live in. And we have seen that, right? Like, look at all the pictures of, you know, dolphins in Venice and all the stuff we have been seeing because people have stayed at their homes. What's the positive effects it has on the environment? I think that trend will continue. No, we have already seen massive tech companies already allowing people to work from home forever. And I think in the retail space, we're also going to see a similar trend of going local. Going local means buying in brands and stores that care about the environment and care about the community. And it's really like, consumers are starting to also vote when they buy. We see this with a lot of our customers and our brands. One of the brands that grew significantly since the lockdown started is a fish shop in Notting Hill. It's called Notting Hill Fish Shop. So literally when the pandemic started, the lockdown was announced, this guy who's basically one of the guys in our community, he's called Chris, he bought a lot of fish for his fish shop, including 200 kilograms of lobster. And he was really worried because it's like, look, nobody's going to come. Like, people are worried they're going to go just to a massive supermarket and I'm going to lose all this stock. Literally in 2 days, he managed to sell all his stock, including the lobster. Maybe because it was Notting Hill, but it's really like, a story of basically shows how more people care about their local communities and their local shops, because we also know that those local shops have a bigger commitment to our communities and to our environment.
Yeah, that's
also, sorry, just on London, because actually for the last, I think, 10, 15 years, we've lost about 20% of Londoners coming to the West End. We have a lot of tourists, which we're not going to have probably for 2 years. And actually, we will be marketing quite hard in the next year or two to get Londoners to fall back in love with the West End. And that isn't just the shiny stores of Bond Street. It is those local side streets, those alleys in Mayfair, the South Molton streets of the world, those independent retailers popping around the galleries. And actually, strategically, we want to try and keep Londoners in love with the West End and Mayfair. And I think your hyper-local point, Gaston, is absolutely right. Now, how do we create more independent and local retail within that setting that gets Londoners not to feel alienated from coming to their town centre or high street, which is the West End? And how do we maintain that beyond COVID and beyond the next couple of years? And they can live in harmony and shop in harmony with all those international tourists when they finally come back to London.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it's an interesting trend because although we might think that, the current situation in a way accelerated that, if you look at, a really interesting for me, like almost barometer of what people are thinking, which is Google search. And I used to work at Google for 5 years. So for me, it's kind of like, I'm always looking what trends are there. And searches that are basically have in the query near me have been growing exponentially for the last 10 years. Just last year, they already grew 45% more compared to the previous year. So you see this trend like really becoming, mainstream for the last 10 years. And I think like probably like this is the time when it's just going to like exponentiate the previous growth.
No, I mean, even just speaking from my own personal experience, I think this is my chance to plug all the local bike shops that I've been frequenting with my new bike. But being able to kind of hop on a bike and bike through, the one upside has been some of the empty streets and feeling like I can be in my own little bubble, but get some exercise and see part of the West End and some really interesting, even appear here, windows with the text in the context. And yeah, just feeling like the city, feeling like a local back in the city. And it plays into the environmental theme, all of the things we've been talking about, that intimacy. We only have a few minutes.
Reclaim your streets, Christina. And we're putting about 5,000 extra bicycle racks literally in the West End this week. So everyone can come and cycle next week or 2 weeks time when we reopen as well.
Well, and a lot of the roads they've announced as well are just going to become bus and cycle only. So I think we're very much headed in that direction of making it feel more pedestrian and cyclist friendly and feeling more local. So right on trend. In the couple minutes we have left, I'd love to just wrap up. We could talk about this for days, I'm sure, but just maybe from each of you, what's one example of someone who you think is a leader right now? What does it mean to be a leader as a retailer right now? And what's something that's giving you hope, a story that makes you hopeful for when stores reopen?
I'll have a little crack, start off. I've got two actually. I think I mean, Selfridges are just utterly inspiring. I mean, there's a reason why they continue to grow and innovate, and they've been the world's best department store for 7 years in a row. And we've been talking to Selfridges a lot, obviously, of how they reopen safely, and what utterly inspiring, which is their whole approach to their colleagues that work there, and how they've worked with them over this period, from their training and their well-being, and they've done a huge amount with their staff. And it's a really people-focused company, as you'd expect in retail, but they're taking it beyond what I've seen other retailers do. And they opened their food hall a couple of weeks ago, and it was the most humbling community sort of opening. It was really about just local residents that sort of came around, Marylebone and Mayfair, and they gave them all flowers, and they just had little intricacies of signage and sanitization. And we started at the start of the panel around what is retail about that customer service, that human experience, that hyper local, which are trends, aren't they? And I think they just epitomize that for me, that they are totally on trend, understand where it's going, and really felt the community spirit of what we've all been through as we started to come out of sort of lockdown. And we've taken that a bit further. We've put flags up around the whole of the West End, which is thanking all the brilliant heroes, all the security staff, the retail staff that worked right through the pandemic. Obviously the NHS, which is incredible in this country. I mean, we have nothing like it around the world. And I think in some way we just wanted to acknowledge our thanks, on behalf of the business community, of just these extraordinary people that have worked through the pandemic and will continue to work as we come out of this. And my other bit of that is the team at New West End Company. I mean, we've never had to work, like lots of us, remotely, never go to the West End for 12 weeks. I was there last week, and just utterly inspired by their own stoic approach to this and wanting to support the businesses. And I've seen the very best of my team, actually, sort of 3 years as chief exec, and just really come out of how they've approached this and worked together and supported it. So yeah, I feel utterly inspired by humans and our approach to this from this experience, which is really good.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Gaston, take us home.
Yeah, I think I feel really inspired by Notting Hill Fish Shop. I think I already mentioned it, and I think what I love about that story is how someone who started just as almost like side hustle, like the founder of Notting Hill Fish Shop. He's an advertising guy, so he used to work in big agency. He said, well, like, actually my passion is not there. I really want to start my own business. This whole blow up happened, and how he managed to reinvent that business so quickly. During the lockdown, he increased sales by 200%. Like at the moment, they are like thinking to expand with us, like the lease for like almost 10 years, because they're seeing like a lot of like demand, and they see a lot of promise. But also what I love is the creativity they show, particularly on the windows, how they use the windows as a way of like, cheering people up and trying to like make sure that, beyond the necessity, there is also a smile. Yesterday, actually, at Beer Here, we had an event with the art directors from LVMH. So the guys who design the windows of Louis Vuitton stores that, as we all know, are like, really inspiring. And they said like, the brand that I'm actually feeling inspired at the moment is Notting Hill Fish Shop, because one of the art directors was a local one. Because they said like, without much budget, and actually without like something that is really, crazy, he is keeping people smiling during this time. And I think that's something that we need to think even more after this experience. I think in the end, retail is about making people feel good and making people feel, that they can be a better version of themselves. And I think, with all the restrictions we're going to have, we need to make sure that it doesn't feel sterile, because we don't go shopping to be, 2 meters apart. All those safety measures are going to be really important, but let's make sure we keep also the fun side of retail. Let's
not be boring, ever.
Excellent way to end it. And on that note, I want to make sure that we have a little bit of time left for Validify, so I'll hand it back to Sandy. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Gaston. Thank you, Jace.
Thank you.
Thank you for an amazing panel and for your insights into retail, and also for the optimistic note. I know it's like easy to think about all of these like safety standards, and as you said, making it sterile. And I'm really hoping that we're going to have more and more positive experiences coming out of it. So I do want, I guess, in the next 10 minutes or so, we have Laura Winch, who's going to talk through some of the tech she's seen and the trends to help retailers adapt as they go online again, as well as open their doors. So Laura, if you want to, I think you're going to share your screen, right?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Great.
Hi, I am Laura Winch. I'm the co-founder of Solidify. So Sandy tasked me with discussing obviously how retail tech is helping retailers move forward. And I definitely don't think 10 or 15 minutes will quite do it justice. But I am aimed today to give you a bit of flavour of some of the interesting technologies that we've seen out there. I'm just going to share my screen and check this is working. Bear with me a second. There we are. So just a bit of a background, my co-founder and I became increasingly frustrated as there are so many of these great new emerging technologies out there, and there seems to be a bit of an inability of a lot of retailers and brands to find and connect with these types of technologies. So over the last couple of years, we have built what we call a vendor management platform, which gives brands the tools to source, evaluate, and manage the procurement of all these new technology solutions into their businesses. One thing I kind of want to say before I kind of get into the bulk of it is that, as we've all seen over the last decade, there has been a movement towards online shopping, and certainly COVID has absolutely bolstered this. But when people think about technology, they often think about the more front-end technology. And what I mean by that is things like marketing, advertising, the rise of mobile, the use of native apps, analytics, etc. And whilst these are all really, really important, today I want to focus a bit more on the kind of back-end technologies. So things that are going to be helping retail stores, their supply chain, and their fulfillment, and really show that technology is now impacting the kind of entire supply chain that's available. So I'm going to start with a company called Go In Store. And this technology enables online customers to be connected via video link directly with store staff to get more information about products. So if you think about this as a particularly useful technology for complex or high worth products. So Jace, you mentioned Tesla, so whether it's cars or sofas or electrical goods, the store staff can actually show the customer via video link what the products look like, give them a lot of additional details and information. And most importantly, this is all done in real time as they're browsing the website. Why I think this is really important is because we've all read a lot about the kind of diminishing role of the store staff. So unfortunately, a lot of stores that have closed during COVID will remain closed. A lot of retailers are looking now to scale back their store estates, and people worried that automation is going to kind of take over and there'll be no need for store staff. But what this technology does, and why I find it really interesting, is that it relies heavily on store assistants to play an integral part in online sales. And why? Because your store staff know a lot more about the product than anyone else, and they can provide customers a very formed and customized service. And what we've seen with this type of product is a massive impact on conversion rates and average order values. And I think it's quite a beautiful example of the synergy between the online and offline worlds. So the exciting topic of stock management. So the nirvana for any retailer is you deliver your product to a customer anywhere in their network at any time. And so whether your product is still in your stores, or it's in your warehouse, or even still with a supplier, you must get it to the end consumer no matter what. And retailers that I've worked with traditionally have struggled with this kind of single data repository, or what we call the one version of the truth, with all this information about their stock. And this has become really apparent during the COVID lockdown, where inventories got stuck in closed stores and companies weren't able to redistribute it, potentially to service increasing demand online. So one of the products that this company called Chemistry has built is called a distributed order management system, which is a single source of information for inventory across stores, your warehouse, suppliers, etc., specifically targeting this problem. And I think, ultimately what they do is they integrate with all your other software in the business, your stores, your logistics providers, and they make sure no matter what, the customer gets their products. Another trend that we've seen coming out of COVID is obviously the amount of inventory that unfortunately is going to be left unsold, either because they got stuck in their stores or because there are certain sectors that we know have really struggled, such as fashion. What we've been seeing in general is that marketplaces have actually fared pretty well during this time, and largely because they've been really nimble and adapted their ranges online for customer demand. So that could be toilet rolls, masks, children's toys, etc. And for retailers who then didn't have a strong online presence, they've been relying heavily on third-party marketplaces. So StockClear is a B2B marketplace. It deals with the issue of overstocks, and it's a new startup coming from France that allows merchants to sell large quantities of products to other businesses to sell. So these businesses can offer a price that they're willing to buy the bulk of these products for them to then sell on. And I think it's quite interesting because we've talked a bit about sustainability, and this type of technology really kind of taps into this kind of zeitgeist, which is around giving products a second life and making sure they don't end up in landfill. So even before COVID started, we saw this rise of kind of hyperlocal fulfillment. So what we're seeing now is that retailers were looking at ways to deliver products from local stores rather than their warehouses, and maybe, Jace, etc., can talk a bit more about this, but whether, stores are actually reducing their forefronts and using the back of their stores as mini warehouses. And what this was enabling retailers to do is offer extremely quick deliveries, be it 1 day, 1 hour. And I think we've all seen this. So Marks and Spencer's launched their 30-minute delivery service for essentials, for example. So Gopher is a transport management system. And what it does is enables retailers to book same-day couriers across multiple vehicle types, which means they can deliver any product. So what they do is they optimize based on vehicle size, based on pricing, or how quickly a vehicle can be deployed, make sure that retailers get the best access to the best couriers to deliver that service. And for a lot of Gopher's clients who have been able to adapt quickly and turn some of their stores into dark stores, they have, continued to provide an amazing delivery experience even during a pandemic. And, we've already just spoken about the kind of rise of the hyper-local shopping experience, and you're going to need these localized fulfillment options to support this. Actually, back to what Gaston was saying, I live near Hackney by Broadway Markets, and I could not believe that there was a 2-hour queue outside the Oyster shop, but it's great to see, the impact that local shopping is having. And so quickly kind of rushing through, the last area obviously to focus on will be stores. So we've all heard that from the 15th of June, retailers in the UK will be opening their stores, and they're now going to be having to navigate things from social distancing. And as we've described, there's going to be much higher expectation around hygiene and safety. As we're beginning to see in other countries, they're already looking at kind of queuing systems, people having to book appointments to visit stores, and the rise of things like contactless payments to reduce the actual number of physical interactions when in the store. We can all sit and try and predict what will happen when the stores open. Will people return? Hopefully we'll find out in a couple of weeks' time. I think what is quite interesting though is this concept of kind of booking appointments will lead to more one-on-one customer service. And it's something that's always been quite prevalent in the luxury sectors, but now we're going to go and see it become a bit more mainstream. So just quickly focusing on a couple of technologies that will engender this. There is one called Qdini, and the key component of their software is a appointment scheduling and queue management system. So in short, it kind of enables you to book a time slot in advance, or if you're at the store and there's a queue, you're given a time slot so you can go away, do something else and come back when it's your turn. And what it does is it creates a much better customer experience, and it avoids long lines outside your store, impatient customers, etc. I think what's also quite interesting is that they also enable you to let a store know that you're coming to their store. So if you've bought something online and you want to go and collect it from the store, they'll have it ready for you. You don't even have to go into the store to collect it, which you know, given the current fears over hygiene and social distancing, could be a great asset for a lot of retailers. A similar ilk is a company we work with called Appointed. So this company helps schedule and manage and deliver virtual services. So whether you're booking an appointment to speak with a store associate or you know, looking to do an online makeup tutorial with someone at the MAC counter in Selfridges, it enables retailers to provide very similar functionality that they do in store, but virtually, and most importantly, you know, at a time that's convenient to your customers. And I think, like you know, Go in Store, it bridges the online and offline experiences, and again, it just shows, you know, how central a role store staff can actually play in terms of you know, bolstering the online experience. And I guess what you guys have kind of mentioned a bit before, which is what we see with these type of solutions is that if people are booking or going to store with an appointment, then they tend to have a much higher purchasing intent. And Jace, you mentioned 90%. I didn't realize it was that high. You know, but this could be really interesting about, you know, what the store of the future will look like. Yes, you might not have the same footfall, but if people that go there are converting at a high level, you know, this could have a huge impact on sales. And what you're offering is a lot more of a personalized customer experiences. And the final one I want to just briefly discuss is called MishiPay. So they focus on the kind of contactless or cashierless payments. And we started to see this a bit, I guess, about a year or so ago with Amazon Go. The idea that you can walk into a store, you can be recognized through your app, tracked as you walk around the store. So you just put things in your basket, you walk out, and they automatically take the payment. So when you think about concerns around social distancing going forward and hygiene, this concept becomes quite attractive. MishiPay is an early stage software company that is trying to bring this type of experience to retailers. And it's a really simple concept. You go in there with the app, you scan a product barcode, which brings up all the information. And then there's an option to pay now. And as you do, it automatically disables any kind of security tag. And you simply walk out of the store, having never gone anywhere near a person or a till. And it's a pretty neat solution. So this has been a kind of whirlwind tour of some of the technologies currently supporting retail services. What I really hope it's shown is that technology is beginning to really impact every part of the retailer supply chain. So before COVID happened, a lot of retailers were more reluctant to, say, develop more enhanced digital experiences or use the plethora of technologies. But what we found that a lot of this was maybe due to kind of management buy-in or different priorities, or people weren't allocating enough money in the budget to technology. And, you know, whilst we can acknowledge that COVID has probably been quite a difficult time for retailers, you know, it can take something as big as this to really drive change, and retailers can no longer move maybe as slowly as they had done before, especially as they're becoming slightly more digitally focused, or ignore the technologies that are needed to support the kind of new ecosystem. One last thing to mention is that technology alone doesn't succeed. Retailers need to be willing to create environments where they're prepared to experiment more and take active risks, which I know, given some of the financial challenges at the moment, that's a kind of difficult. In addition, they need to think about people and who will be using the technology. So I'm going to use Gaston as an example. As a CMO, he might have a desire to use technology to help his marketing objectives. But whilst he might buy the product and whilst his CTO might implement it, it will be his team who'll be using it day to day. And they're not often part of the decision-making process. So to get the most out of any technology, you need to make sure you have the right skills in your business, and that, you know, they're getting the right training to make sure you're really getting the benefits of using this technology. I think, you know, I'm personally very excited and interested to see how retail is going to adapt in both the short term and long term. And I think retail technology has quite an exciting future. So if anyone wants to look at any of these technologies, you can do so via our platform, which is free to sign up, or go directly to me. I'm also going to be sharing after this via Sandy a recent report we did, which hopefully she will circulate to anyone that might be interested. Thank you for listening. Over to you, Sandy.
Thank you so much, Laura. And hopefully we've given you some food for thought as we approach the 15th of June. Just to quickly wrap up, I wanted to give a huge thank you to everyone who attended. as well as our esteemed panel of experts. So Christina, Gaston, Jason, Laura, thank you so much for your time. So as Laura mentioned, I'll just be following up with everyone that attended or that signed up with some links to some additional information, such as the report, as well as some other content that appear here and New West End put out. So I know you have Jace, the West End Resilience series. Gaston up here continues to put content out there to support brands. So I'll make sure everyone gets that. And thank you to the Wharton and Kellogg alumni clubs as well. I did get one message to announce is that if anyone that's interested, there is an Investing in Uncertain Times session coming up on Wednesday, again through the Wharton Alumni Club, and then as well as public speaking on Zoom the Wednesday after that. So sign up for those events. And with that, I'll give, well, we're 5 minutes over, so thank you for staying on those extra 5 minutes, and I hope you have a great evening. Thank you.